Welcome back to the show where we run you through all the Dolphins news you need to know about. After running through the news you need to know about, we run you through the fan Q&A where we answer fans' questions. A lot of interesting news today to discuss, and I'm very excited to talk about it. A lot of really exciting news. So let's start here. This is the first story. I'm sorry, I'm hitting my thing setting the mic. This first story comes from Pro Football Rumors. The Dolphins' draft order is officially cemented. The Dolphins will be picking 29th in the draft. And, not probably one of the worst outcomes it could have been, especially during the season, for the 49ers at least. It looked like we could have a half-decent pick, maybe like a mid-round pick, maybe somewhere from 15 to 22. Obviously, that ended up going that way. So, at the end of the day, I'm not mad about it because the Dolphins did cash in on the draft with Waddle, obviously trading back up to get him, and obviously Jalen Phillips and Javon Holland. Plus, they have a lot of first-round picks down the line and a lot of draft capital down the line as well. So, at the end of the day, I don't think the Dolphins lose out on too much. Plus, they have a lot of cap space. They have the most cap space in free agency this year. So, they have a lot of different... Not only do they have draft capital in the future, but a lot of cap space this year. So they have a lot of different avenues to either trade up in the draft if they want to, or, just a lot of avenues to make the team better is what I'm trying to say. Whether that's through free agency or they could trade up or whatever they need to do. They have all of the assets they could do it. This next news story is kind of, I don't know how to explain it. It's a little upsetting, I guess. This comes from Pro Football Rumors. Brian Daboll chooses the New York job, obviously, over the Dolphins job. You all have already heard this a million times. I'm not going to stick too much on this topic, but, it is what it is. That's all I really have to say about it. I don't know. I don't know what else to really say. Other than Stephen Ross put himself in this position to not get Brian Daboll. I don't think it's the end-all, be-all. I mean, we have no idea how any of these guys are going to work out. Obviously Brian had a lot of things going for him. Obviously Dolphins fans know firsthand how creative his scheme is. It's not just Josh Allen. His scheme is creative, and he's a great play caller, and he has been his entire life, or at least his entire NFL career as he's been calling plays. So it does kind of sting a little bit. But it is what it is. I think there's a lot of underrated candidates that we're going to talk about later in the show that kind of gives me hope. I was wrong about some of the candidates that I talked about last week. I can't wait to get into that, which leads us to our next news story. Actually, we're going to get this news story out of the way before we get into the last some of the other coaching news that we have to talk about. The Dolphins, you guys have probably heard this all day, and this story has just made me mad for like the last 3 days. I don't know, for whenever this started being reported. This story comes from Pro Football Rumors. Dolphins were prepared to trade all 3 2020 first-round picks to Bengals for Joe Burrow. We knew this was reported at the time. We knew this. It would have been amazing if they were able to get it done. They weren't able to get it done. Who cares? The Bengals had the number 1 overall pick. People point out, the Dolphins, we won the Tank Bowl, and then it ended up hurting us in the end. Nobody could have seen any of this happening. We knew Joe Burrow was going to be a great player. Did we know that he was going to take that team to the Super Bowl the second year? Not to mention the fact that he would not have had the same weapons that he had in Cincinnati that he would have had in Miami. He would not have had the same... I don't know if he would have... I think he probably would have had a more successful rookie year. I don't know if we would have maybe we would have went to the Super Bowl. I really can't tell you. I know that our offense is much worse than the Bengals offense, but he would have had better coaching, in my opinion. He probably would have had... Obviously, would have had a way better defense, especially his first 2 years. Who knows what would have happened? And it's hard for me to... both of those teams won one, obviously, one 10-game year, and then the other was a 9-game 1 year. So he would have had a better team. I don't know. I don't want to get into it. Who really cares? Move on. I really don't want to talk. This is more of a fantasy than Herbert. Obviously, Herbert we could have had. This is a lot different than that. So to me, it's just an annoying thing that people keep. The Dolphins. It's like no. I don't know. It is what it is. And people are like, point out the organization's failure to tank. I've always been anti-tank. And I still am anti-tank. I don't think you should just throw away a season and with the object to lose a season. You shouldn't go into a season like, okay, we're going to try to lose as many games as possible. I'm just not one of those people. I never have been, never will be, and haven't changed my opinion on that. So let's move on. Again, just a very annoying story in my opinion. So let's move on from this into some of the coaching news. This next news story comes from Pro Football Rumors. Mike McDaniel and Kellen Moore had second interviews this week as of this episode came out. Mike McDaniel's was Monday. I think, what is this, a Tuesday? I think it actually was on Tuesday. And Kellen Moore has already interviewed this week. The story goes on to say all signs point to the Dolphins hiring their next head coach this week, which is very exciting. Hopefully this gets done by Wednesday. I'm going to make a separate video about that when they make the announcement, whoever it is. But I wanted to talk about the three final candidates. We'll get to Jim Harbaugh after this story because I want to focus on Kellen Moore and Mike McDaniel. Those are the two that interviewed this week. Obviously, those were their second interviews. I want to start with Kellen Moore because to me, this is the worst outcome of the other two. I don't really understand, and I was wrong about Mike McDaniel, and I want to get into that later. But Kellen Moore really doesn't have. There's nothing that I can look about. Sorry, I'm stuttering so much. Look at his career. I'm trying to figure out what I really want to say here. There's just nothing when I look at Kellen Moore's coaching career that I can point to be like, okay, this is what I'm excited about, what he could bring to the franchise. He really just doesn't bring anything to the franchise. The only thing that I could come up with on Kellen Moore is that he played in the NFL. That's pretty much it. And coaching and playing are two different things. Now, granted, the man has coached and has had some success on a team. I would say that the team to me, the team is the bigger part of the success than his coaching. Now, one thing I will say that is interesting about Kellen Moore's coaching career, he obviously retired and then quickly became a coach in the NFL, which is unheard of most of the time. So that's a pretty big positive when you talk about Kellen Moore, because that is rare. That doesn't happen all the time. So he obviously has the talent for it. And they retained him after, the coaching turnover in Dallas. That, they kept him on the staff. So those are all kind of positives, I would say, about Kellen Moore. But there's nothing else I can really point to be excited about Kellen Moore. And not to say that this man can't be a great head coach, because who knows? At the end of the day, who knows? But I just really, there's nothing about, like I said, his coaching career that gets me excited. The big topic and the big theme, at least, of coaching or picking coaches for me is what schematically can you bring, especially in today's day and age. When you look at all the great coaches in the league, they all bring something schematically to the table that other people don't, and all of the great coaches do. There's not really a Bill Cowher anymore. That's kind of, Mike Tomlin, I guess, is the most successful Bill Cowher type of head coach, where he is kind of just an overseer and doesn't really bring it. He's just a great leader of men, and that's his best attribute. All the other guys are great football minds. Not to say Mike Tomlin's not a great football mind, but I'm saying all the other great coaches bring their own thing, own special schematically to something, strategy, all of that stuff to the table. And Kellen Moore, I can't really see that in him. I didn't really see much of a difference between his offense and Jason Garrett's offense, if I'm being honest. They're very similar, and his offense, watching his offense in Dallas, they really kind of leaned mostly on their talent. There wasn't a lot of creativity there. If Kyle Shanahan was coaching the Cowboys offense, I feel like they probably would have a lot more success. If any of the top offensive minds were coaching or offensive coordinators for that matter, were coaching the Cowboys, they would have a lot more success. So for me, Kellen Moore, I feel like I spent a little bit too much time on that, but to me, Kellen Moore is just, there's just nothing there for me to be excited about as a fan. So yeah, there you go. I mean, again, and one point I will point out one more time is in recent, I don't know why I'm starting so much, sorry guys, but in recent history, when you think about successful coaching hires, every single one of them were really good at calling offensive plays or calling defensive plays, and really creative and innovative, either on the offensive side of the ball or the defensive side of the ball as coordinators. We think about Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan. I'm forgetting a bunch of other people. Even Matt LaFleur. All of those guys had success at calling plays and brought something unique schematically and strategy-wise that made them successful. And Kellen Moore, to me, just doesn't have that. And I feel like that's the blueprint right now in the NFL. So, moving on from Kellen Moore, let's get to Mike McDaniel. Now, there's a lot of interesting stuff on Mike McDaniel. I said, I really didn't spend too much time on Mike McDaniel last week because I was like, how much, obviously the man doesn't call plays in San Francisco. What does he bring to the Dolphins that I could get excited about? And there really wasn't anything. I couldn't find anything. I did more research on Mike McDaniel because he seems to be the favorite out of the two guys that we're going to talk about when it comes to Harbaugh and Kellen Moore. And I really wanted to kind of get to know what makes this guy so special. And I think the biggest thing that from the research that I did, which is Google, anybody can do. I don't want to sound like I did anything special, but the thing that I kind of want to take back is he has a lot of respect from his players. And anytime you hear former NFL players say that about coaches that they've had, it's always a really good thing. And it was really nice to hear from multiple places that he's coached, that players that he's coached from Cleveland to Washington had a lot of really good things to say about him, and I wanted to bring that up. And actually, the things that I've read, what former players have said, which we're about to read right now, have said about the dude, has gotten me excited. It really has. And they really said a lot of the things that I want to hear when it comes to being able to communicate and lead and strategy and scheme. Have all of the former players that have worked for him have had, really great things to say about him when it comes to those things. So I was like, wow, I didn't, not to say that I was ignorant on the situation. I guess I kind of was. I guess that's the best way to put it. But I was really surprised to find all of this stuff about him. So let's get into some of the things, and this comes from Pierre Garçon, who was a very good receiver for a long time in Indianapolis and Washington. Pierre Garçon had this to say about Mike McDaniel. He said he's a very smart guy. He went to Yale. He's a great football mind. He can figure anything out and learn how to communicate it to the players. That's the most important part, because we've heard all these great coaches when they explain how successful they were or successful their coaching tree was. It's all about teaching, because coaching is a teaching profession. I mean, if you watch the John Madden documentary, that's what they attributed John being so great at, not only to teaching audiences football, but teaching his players football and how to play the game. And the fact that Pierre Garçon, who was a great player himself, was able to say, yes, Mike McDaniel, again, we'll read the quote, he's a great football mind. He can figure out anything and learn how to communicate it to his players. That's the most important part. He can communicate it to his players. He can teach it to his players. And that's the most important thing. And the fact that someone like of Pierre Garçon's stature, who was in an NFL locker room, can say that, I think is a huge positive. Pierre goes on to say, the key to football is communicating with the players and to be smart. And he's very savvy, very down to earth. He's a player's coach. The players actually like him. Okay? Not only does Pierre Garçon compliment his football mind, but he compliments his leadership as well, which I think is very important. And he's not the only player to say this about him. And again, these are from two different places in two different franchises in two different locker rooms. So we're going to go on to the next player, which is Andrew Hawkins, who, if you've ever listened to Andrew Hawkins in his podcast, the Hawkins Joe Thomas podcast, it's very good. So I would highly recommend it. So this is what Andrew Hawkins had to say. He's tweeted about this guy multiple times, and this is one of the tweets he had. He says, again, you guys can look at this at his Twitter. Andrew Hawkins said, I promise you there is not a brighter football mind in the league when talking about Mike McDaniel. He goes on to say, and different things he said about Mike McDaniel, that he would... Let me pull up the tweet so I can get it. He goes on to say, again, this is Andrew Hawkins. This is what else he had to say about Mike McDaniel. He says, hearing multiple teams have inquired about 49ers run game quarterback Mike McDaniel, He says, I played under, He says, I played one season under Mike, and if they want an offensive guru, I'd bet every dollar in my account that no candidate understands offensive football the way he does. Every dollar. So, when I read this stuff about him and heard some other people talk about him that work around the NFL, this is the guy that I would want to coach Tua. Because if he can translate Kyle Shanahan's offense to the Dolphins, not only can he do that, not only if he can do that, but also be a great leader and a great head coach. And by the way, the guy is 38 years old. He's actually older than Sean McVay. I don't know why I had to bring that up, but I was curious because the guy looked like he was 25. I was like, this guy looks like he's 25 years old. So he's an older guy. I think Don Shula became a head coach at around the same age as he did. So not only can he translate one of the most innovative offenses we've ever seen in Kyle Shanahan, can he translate that to the Dolphins, but he's also a great leader, and he's a great coach, and he's a great teacher. And I think those are the things when I read about about him that I was like, okay, this guy can actually do this. It gets me excited. It actually makes me want the Dolphins to hire him. And I hope they do hire him because I think he can be a great head coach. If this is, I mean, these are two separate. By the way, these guys probably have never talked to each other. Andrew Hawkins, Pierre Garçon did not play on the same team together. Obviously, Andrew Hawkins played for the Browns, and Pierre Garçon at the time was with the Washington football team when Mike McDaniel was coaching him. So, to me, that shows consistency. You know, he was in two different places and with two different franchises and two different teams, and the player said the same thing about him, which shows me he's consistent, and which is what we want. You know, this is not an Adam Gase, this is not a Joe Philbin who had success in one spot. By the way, both of those guys were under a franchise quarterback. Mike McDaniel, that's another thing that Mike McDaniel he doesn't have going for, or has going for him, is, you know, he's coming from Jimmy Garoppolo. And that isn't exactly Peyton Manning or Brett Favre or Aaron Rodgers, who's an all-time great player. And Joe Philbin and Adam Gase got hired off of their merit. So, you know, that's, I think, another positive. And same thing with Kellen Moore. I mean, Kellen Moore's probably going to get hired, and he was coaching a franchise quarterback in Dak Prescott, which is another kind of downside to him. And I hope to God the Dolphins don't hire Kellen Moore when they have had this guy in their building. And we're going to get to the other guy, which is Jim Harbaugh. It's like, guys, it's clear. I mean, if I can do this research, and I'm a fan, for God's sakes, you guys can do the research and figure out, okay, Mike McDaniel is obviously really well respected and a really smart person, and he has the respect of his players. Probably should hire that guy. I think one of the things that's going against Mike, and especially when I first saw him, is, you know, you see the press conference comedy videos, and you kind of see, like, he looks like he's 23 or 24. You know, he looks really young. And it's like, okay. And, you know, from those videos, press conferences, like, does he take it seriously? And if you do more research on the guy, it's like, wow, this guy really knows what he's doing, has a lot of respect. Dude, you know, one thing, and we'll leave this on Mike McDaniel, it's hard to get that kind of respect from your players. To me, that means you're doing something really good and really right. And you don't hear that many times from coaching candidates. To have both, to be a really smart person, to be able to communicate football and be a good leader, and your players like you, that's very hard to have. And all the great head coaches, for the most part, have had that. And to me, this is the best guy. Not only for Tua, because his offense, and I think this is one of the bigger reasons, his offense is so quarterback friendly. It takes a lot of pressure off the quarterback. I mean, we've seen that offense take Jimmy Garoppolo to the Super Bowl and to an NFC championship. And Jimmy Garoppolo, God bless the man, but he's not a top 20 quarterback. And to do that in this day and age is pretty special. And I know that the 49ers offense, at least the last two playoff games, weren't they moved the ball, but they couldn't finish. But a lot of that had to do with Jimmy. I mean, you know, Jimmy misreads. Jimmy didn't play at his best. But they still got him there, and which is impressive. So there's a lot of really good things to like about Mike McDaniel. Very excited about that. If I was the Dolphins, if I couldn't get Jim, I would probably, not probably, I 1000% would hire Mike McDaniel. And honestly, the more I read about Mike McDaniel, the more I'm like, maybe the Dolphins just go in that direction. Because I think the negatives of Harbaugh, Mike doesn't really have those negatives. And that's what we'll get into next. So this tweet, again, comes from a Minnesota beat writer. This tweet I thought was really interesting. This was, by the time this podcast comes out, this tweet is 2 days old. So obviously this guy was kind of wrong. But since this tweet, we've gotten a lot of other people kind of chiming in on this and saying, oh, the Dolphins-Jim Harbaugh connection is real. So this tweet came from Mark Carman, and I guess he's a beat writer for the Vikings. He says, hearing from reliable sources, Jim Harbaugh will tell the team today or / tomorrow he is leaving to be the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. Obviously, he was telling that to his Michigan team. Could have taken the Minnesota job, preferred Miami. Outside chance Michigan pays over the top and he stays, but bet on Miami. And ever since that tweet, everybody's been kind of like, oh, Jim Harbaugh to the Dolphins might be a real thing. Now, obviously, this guy was wrong. Harbaugh did not sign to be the head coach of the Dolphins Monday. So he was wrong about that. And another report came out today that Harbaugh is flying to Minnesota to do an interview. So take that with a grain of salt. To me, this is more of a fantasy than it is anything. And we'll see. If it happens, it would be fantastic. I think Jim Harbaugh is a fantastic coach. I want to start with the negatives. First of all, Jim Harbaugh and both of the Harbaughs are one of my favorite coaches in the league. I hate the Baltimore Ravens with everything I have as a Dolphins fan. But they're great head coaches, and you can really respect the identity that they give their teams and the way that their teams play football is amazing. And they're all obviously blue-collar, hard-nosed teams that play defense and run the football, and the line of scrimmages are really important to them as football coaches, which is something that this team has desperately needed for the last 5 years. But I want to start with the negatives of Jim Harbaugh. The negatives of Jim Harbaugh and things that you read about him in his time in San Francisco, which was very successful, he wore on people. And, sorry, I had a little bit of a cough. He wore on people. His attitude, he's a little bit rude, I guess, at times. He doesn't really necessarily get along with his coaching staff a lot of the time. Clearly, he does something right, though. I will say that. But I guess the negative to Jim is he kind of wears out his welcome very quickly. And, dude, this has been an issue with him since he was a player. People in his locker rooms, if you've ever heard Jim, and this is like a super deep cut, but if you've ever heard Jim McMahon talk about Harbaugh, who was his backup at the time, it's not positive. It's very negative. And so I guess the negatives to Jim is I guess he doesn't really get along with people that well, which is weird because he's such a successful coach. I mean, he was successful at Stanford. He was successful, obviously, at Michigan, and very successful with the San Francisco 49ers. I don't really understand how those two things... I mean, Bill Belichick, I guess, is the same way in a weird way, but he's been able to stay around longer. I don't know. It's just a weird thing. When you read about Jim Harbaugh, it's weird. That's all I got to say. It's very weird when you hear stuff like that. It's like... I think the reason it's weird is because it doesn't make sense. It's like, how can someone like that be such a successful head coach? I don't know. I don't know. Clearly, John and Jim are different people. I mean, from what you read, it seems like John is more laid back than Jim, I would say. And maybe that's why he's probably the reason he's lasted as long as he has. And Jim is probably a little bit more hard. Core, a little bit more cold. I get not cold is the word to describe Jim, but just a little, maybe a little bit of a hothead, a little bit aggressive at times. I don't know the best way to describe it. And some people have described it as weird as well. So I don't know. It's like I said, some of the stuff you weird about the dude, it's not great. So yeah, that's kind of something that I would look at if I was Steven Ross. Be like, this guy kind of doesn't stay in one place for that long. He was only with the 49ers for, I believe, 4 years. He was with Michigan, 3 to 4 years? He wasn't with Michigan very long. I don't remember how long he was with Stanford. So, yeah, that kind of concerns me a little bit if I'm the owner of the team. But the positives of Jim Harbaugh greatly outweigh the negatives. When you think about his time in San Francisco, it's insane. So this is his head coaching career. His college career, he was 119-51. That's including Stanford and Michigan. He was 119 wins to 51 losses. Okay? His NFL career, his regular season NFL record was 44-19. Okay? Which is insane. His postseason record was 5-3, which is really good. Really good. He had 2 NFC Championship appearances, and obviously a Super Bowl berth, which he ended up losing to his brother at the time. So this, and again, in a very short amount of time. He was only with San Francisco, I believe, 4 years. It's either 3 or 4. And yeah, it's pretty crazy. Pretty crazy. So the dude is very successful. I think the thing, and again, the stuff that you read about him being weird and a little off, I guess you could say, it's like, okay, but everywhere this guy goes, he has success. He has not went one place and failed yet, whether that's in the NFL or college. And obviously he was a former player too, so clearly he knows what it takes to win in the league. He went to the AFC Championship as a player, as a quarterback. So everywhere this guy goes, success follows. So it's kind of hard not to want Jim Harbaugh to coach your team. I love the way his team plays. His teams play, the style of play that they play with is very ideal for not only Tua, but the roster as it stands right now is perfect for it. At least the defense is. The offense obviously needs to be fixed. But if you're Harbaugh, or if you're Mike McDaniel, or if you're Kellen Moore, hopefully not Kellen Moore, but if you're the other two, you're going into a situation that it's going to be hard not to, if like Harbaugh, or let's use Harbaugh as an example. This dude's had a lot of success, right? He stepped into a San Francisco 49 team that the year before he got there, they were 6-10. After he got there, they were one of the best teams in the NFL. Obviously, well, at the time that he was coaching there, they were fantastic. He completely turned the franchise around very quickly. And he was walking into not a great situation in San Francisco. He's going into the Dolphins situation with a ton of draft picks in the future, the most cap space in the league, a team that has had back-to-back winning seasons, a team that has a lot of really good defensive players, and some talent on the offensive side of the ball when you talk about individually. So you're walking into a really good situation when you think about actually coaching a team. And I think the most important thing about the Harbaugh thing that I'm totally for is the fact that this dude is more of he's a leader. His presence, I guess at times can be a little bit more overbearing, but Chris Grier is going to completely get out of this dude's way, okay? Which is great, in my opinion. Because Chris Grier, I don't know what Chris Grier does, other than all Chris Grier has done, and the only reason he still has a job is because the man has been a doormat. Every time someone gets fired under his watch, and this is just facts, guys. I mean, I don't know unless this man can come out and have a press conference and refute these reports, which is what I would do if I was Chris Grier, because if people were saying this about me, I would be pretty upset. I would definitely take ownership over my failures, that's for sure, if I was Chris Grier. But every time someone gets fired, his excuses of why they haven't had successful drafts and why they haven't had successful seasons is it wasn't my decision to draft those players. It was the coach's decision to draft those players. Okay, so what do you do, Chris? I just don't understand. I know I've said this last 2 podcasts, but it's like, what the heck does Chris Grier do then? I don't understand. Maybe that's the problem, Chris. Maybe it's because you don't do anything. Then I don't know. I don't want to talk about Chris Grier anymore. But if Jim Harbaugh was hired here, we would at least know who's making the picks. It would be Jim Harbaugh, which I trust Jim's mind, his football mind, more than Chris Grier's football mind. I think we can all agree on that. So the guy is a phenomenal head coach, whether it's college or the NFL. All he does is win. So to me, Jim Harbaugh would be the number 1 candidate. To me, these reports aren't realistic. I don't necessarily believe them. So I would take it with a grain of salt. All right, guys. I think if one last point I want to make, I think the outcome of this, whatever it will be, whether it's Harbaugh or Dan McDaniel, I think both of those hires are great for Tua. If the weird thing is we got the report that the Dolphins are moving forward with Tua this year. We was also Stephen Ross. This isn't a report. You guys can watch it. Stephen Ross said in his press conference, either this or the man's just a flat out liar. Who knows? That whoever the next head coach is will decide who the quarterback is going forward. So it's kind of like, okay, so what is the truth here? Is the report true, or do we believe Stephen Ross is the owner of the team? I don't know. But if it is true, if the report is true that the Dolphins are moving forward with Tua, I think the best thing that can happen to his career is either McDaniel or Harbaugh. I don't even think it's close. So let's move on. I think that's it for the news, guys. I think we've done it. We've cleared it. There's half an hour of news, which is pretty good. So let's get into the fan Q&A where we answer Fins fans' questions. And I'm sure as soon as I upload this podcast tomorrow, they'll have hired their coach. But that's okay. We'll make another video. This next question comes from Beef. He says, you guys probably haven't been able to hear me that well. Hopefully the audio is fine. This first question comes from Beef. He says, "Hey Skaggs, just throwing this out there. Even though it's a sore subject, where would be a good team for Flores? I would love to see him coach for Minnesota. If not, I would also see him in Chicago." This is a great question. I think, at least from reports today, it's either going to be New Orleans or Houston is where he's going to coach. I don't really care where Brian Flores goes, as long as it's not in the AFC. If anywhere in the NFC is fine. If he goes to New Orleans, if he goes to Chicago, if he goes to Minnesota, as long as it's not in the AFC, I don't really care. Honestly, I don't really care if he goes to the Texans either, if I'm being completely honest with you. I just do not care. It was the Stephen Ross's and Chris Grier's decision to cut the man. And, listening to podcasts that, to me, know what they're actually talking about, and not to say that I'm aligning my opinions with these people, because I have my own, at least I try to have my own opinions, for God's sakes, but, people that I think know that football, what they have said about the Brian Flores firing, it's like, it makes it even worse, guys. It makes it even worse. I mean, from people like Bill Parcells to, Phil Simms, who was a former player, a lot of just former great people who have been around great teams and have had a lot of success in the NFL, for them to be like Brian Flores, the firing of Brian Flores was a mistake. Nobody on ESPN I have listened to. ESPN is a joke, but, to hear former players and former great coaches say that about him, obviously Brian and Bill are very close in friendship, but it sucks, man. The dude's going to have success wherever he goes, so yeah, it is what it is. This next question comes from Beef. He says, "Hey Skaggs, do you think Dolphins must get things moving and improving in the offseason, because it's very likely Chris Grier is on ice next year? Do you think if we had a bad season and a bad draft class, Chris Grier will most likely be gone?" I don't know, man. He's survived a lot. I really don't know. The man's been with the organization, I think, 25 years. So who knows, man? I really cannot answer that question. This next question comes from Beef. He says, "Hey Skaggs, last Q&A, you went over some of the pros and cons of some of the coaching candidates for the Dolphins. I just want to hear, what can Jim Harbaugh do as a head coach? Do you see anything he can do better at being a head coach than Brian Flores did?" Yeah, I think the thing that he can do better is, I think he's going to be, I think one of the things that Brian lacked, and one of the things that he sucked at is, not sucked at, but I think Harbaugh's ability to understand what a season is, and to understand that these are the guys that I'm riding with for a season no matter what, and I have to pick and choose my spots for criticism and criticize them in the right way and stuff like that, I think is what Harbaugh's really good at. I think what Brian did to kind of handle it, he knew the deficiencies of the team, especially on the offense side of the football, and he just did a really bad job of either improving it or helping the situation in any way. He made it worse. I think that's the biggest failure of Brian Flores in Miami. And I don't even want to use the word failure, because the man was a great head coach, and he was a great a great leader to the defense, I should say, because it seems like nobody on the offense really liked him. I mean, I think that's been pretty clear. But I think Harbaugh's ability to not only reach the defense but the offense, I think, is to lead the entire team and the entire organization. I think is better than when Brian. And obviously Harbaugh has been coaching at the head coach level for a lot longer than Brian, so he has a lot more knowledge, and I think he's just a better leader all around than Brian Flores. I think that's what he brings to the table better. This next question comes from Richard Rodriguez. He says, what makes the 49ers run game special, and could McDaniel replicate it in Miami with this offensive line? No, he cannot replicate it with this offensive line. There was something very interesting that Mike McDaniel said in a press conference where he said that, we want, they especially in San Francisco, they invested in their offensive line. They gave up draft picks for Trent Williams. They invested high value, a lot of money into their offensive line in free agency and high draft picks in their offensive line. So that's very important to their success, obviously, into the scheme and to his philosophy. And I think that's a big plus for Mike McDaniel, because Chris Grier could just shut the heck up and listen to Mike McDaniel when it comes to drafting and picking offensive linemen. Okay, because he's been around it, he knows the right way to do it, and so I think that's a great thing that he would bring to the team. And same thing with Harbaugh. He knows how to build the defensive line and offensive line. He knows how to build the line of scrimmage on both sides of the football, and I think they could fix that. And what makes the 49ers run game special, and can he replicate it in Miami? Yes, I think he can, from what the other players have said about him. And I think he can. And I think what makes it the run game so special is it's innovative. It can be any front, whether you love the box or you don't, 4-3 or 3-4. Doesn't really matter what the front is. They have a play to beat every front in the NFL, which is unique. A lot of teams only run... they're like, okay, the Cowboys are a great example of this. The Cowboys only run the same set of runs every game. And they're like, we're better than this team. We're just going to run on them. They just run the same run plays. The Niners, it's kind of like New England and Josh McDaniels. They change it up from week to week. They have their staple plays, but they also have something new every week, and they adjust to the defense that they're playing. So I think that's what makes them so unique and so good. And that's what makes every play caller so unique and so good is, they adapt to what you do to beat what you do. And that's what makes those guys so good at what they do. This next question comes from Baller. He says, what are your thoughts on Mike McDaniel potentially becoming the head coach? Well, Baller, I think we've covered it. And yeah, I think he would be a really good head coach for all the reasons that I've mentioned. This next question comes from Steve. He says, Skaggs, going back to when Stephen Ross took ownership of the Dolphins, it seemed like every front office has been toxic. Do you think the Dolphins will ever win a Super Bowl as long as Ross owns the team? I have no idea. It depends on what he does now. This is his last hurrah, guys. This is his last gasp of breath as this owner. I don't want to sound morbid. The man is not very young. Unless somehow that this... And again, if it's Kellen Moore, then yeah. Stephen Ross is going to make another decision on head coach, unfortunately. But if he picks McDaniel and Harbaugh, the only way those two fail is if it's because of the Stephen Ross, Chris Grier thing, in my opinion. Other than the fact that maybe Mike McDaniel doesn't have success because he is so young, but and he has been a head coach before, maybe it'll take a little bit more time than someone like Harbaugh. But to me, those two guys are talented. We just went over why they're talented. We just went over how, we know Harbaugh's talented as a head coach, but we just went over what the players had to say about Mike McDaniel. And the common denominator in every failure that this franchise has had in terms of regime is Chris Grier and Stephen Ross. So, to me, it would be their fault. So, I guess you're kind of saying what I'm saying right now, Steve, is that I think if they get this coaching hire right, though, I think it'll change. They just have to get it right, man. I think Brian had his own faults, and I think those have been well documented since his firing. That it wasn't just Chris Greer and Stephen Ross. Yes, they did do stupid stuff, obviously, but Brian did his fair share of stupid stuff as well. And I think it was kind of it wasn't just Chris Greer and Stephen Ross. I think the difference this time around, hopefully these two can just overcome it. I don't know how to answer this question. It's such a hard one to answer. We won't know until it happens. But yeah, I think there is a way to have success under Stephen Ross. Yes, if that's the question. This next question comes from SM. He says, everyone seems to know who our next head coach will be. What about Eric Bieniemy or Carmichael, the Saints OC, the Saints OC for the past 10 years? Why are we so boxed into what the talking heads say? It's not just the talking heads. I think Mike McDaniel is someone who it's definitely not. Nobody knows in terms of the talking heads. Like, I don't think anybody knows Mike McDaniel. So Mike McDaniel's earned his stripes. And I think the reason you don't hear Eric Bieniemy and I don't know the Saints OC. Listen, I don't really know much about that guy. I don't want to speak too, but he was under Sean Payton, so I don't know what to really say about that. But I don't know why Eric Bieniemy, whether it's racism or whatever it is, I don't really know what it is. To be honest with you, I don't know. I couldn't tell you why Eric Bieniemy isn't a head coach or hasn't at least been interviewed. This next question comes from Steve. He says, Skag, to me, Tua is not a franchise quarterback. To me, a franchise quarterback can make all the throws in key situations, put the team on his back, and win big games. Giving you the opportunity to get and win multiple Super Bowls. Okay. From what I've seen, Tua cannot do those things. Do you honestly feel like Tua can do those things? Yeah, I think with a better offense. Listen, I don't know if Tua will ever. Who knows? Because I don't want to sit here and act like from what Tua showed, it's like, oh, this guy can be Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert. I don't really know, but the things that I have seen from him, he can be a great quarterback. I do believe that he can. He just has to fix some of the things that he's just not really that great at right now. And he has to have a better team around him. He just does. Every great quarterback has a good team around him. People want to act like Joe Burrow does it by himself. Yeah, Joe Burrow does a lot for that offense, clearly. But Joe Burrow also has T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and Joe Mixon, to throw to. And a really good tight end, and a good play caller in Zach Taylor. So, Tua did not have those things. Tua, when you compare all the other great quarterbacks in the league, take all top 15 quarterbacks in the NFL, they all have better teams than he does on the offense side of the football. So you have to take that into account. And his situation when it comes from the coaching side of it hasn't been great either, because since he's got there, Brian Flores has clearly not liked him. So there's a lot of things that were going against Tua, but despite all that, the thing that he has shown that makes me like him as a player is his great feel for the game. He has fantastic pocket presence. His mobility in the pocket is amazing. He has a quick release. He makes fast decisions with the football. His ability to manipulate the back end of the defense with his head is special, and that all comes from instincts. He's got great instincts for the game of football. I think some of the things that he has to get better at, people want to bring up the deep ball arm strength all the time. I think Tua has good enough arm strength to be just fine in the NFL, especially when you talk about some of the down the field throws. I think a lot of that stuff has to do with the offensive line and coaching, for that matter. But I think the things that he has to get better at is, for whatever reason, his throws over the middle from 15 yards and up have not been great so far. And now people might say, oh, that's arm strength. No, because he's made some pretty tough throws from the 15-yard line, 15 yards in the middle of the field, 20, 30 yards in the middle of the field. We've seen him do it, whether it was the deep corner out to Waddle, whether it was, the third and long backed up on your own end zone against the Cardinals. He's made throws like that before. I don't understand. I don't know really what it really only came up this year. And not beginning of the year, he was perfectly fine with those throws. As the year went on, he got worse at it. Whether that's throwing in weather, whatever it is, I really can't put my finger on it. I don't know, but that's the biggest the biggest deficiency in his game right now. Is throws over the middle. I don't know what the heck the issue is there. I think it definitely can be fixed. I don't know what it was. I really don't know. But I don't know what I want to say really about that. I was trying to think. I don't know. I was thinking. And the last thing I want to add on to that, with the whole Tua thing, is he's made franchise quarterback level throws. I feel like people keep bringing, like, he has made those throws. Like, you can, I could sit here and name them all for you. Or you could go watch them yourselves. He's made great throws in his career so far as a Dolphin. It's just he hasn't been able to consistently do it. And I think that has, and I think the biggest reason for that is not because I think Tua has a chance to still be something in the NFL. And not everybody agrees with me, and who knows if the next head coach does. So we'll see. But Steve, and every Dolphins fan, including Steve, has the right to believe that with Tua. That's the dumbest way I could have said that. I think they have a good argument for it, against it, as well as the other side. I think we also, the people that aren't on Tua's side, have a good argument for it as well. This next question comes from Richard. He says the Dolphins should hire Josh Boyer as the head coach to see if he can run the Dolphins. Hire Norm Chow? I don't know who that is. His offense coordinator, the USC coordinator. I don't know who that is. I don't know if he's a good coach or not. But Josh Boyer, listen. I said that the same thing when the whole thing went down. Is like, just hire. I mean, I wouldn't be super upset with that, but clearly, not a lot of faith in Josh Boyer being a head coach. Maybe a defensive coordinator, and it's been rumored that the Dolphins will have him back as a defensive coordinator for whoever becomes the next head coach, which is a great idea because Josh is a fantastic defensive coordinator. This next question comes from Mark. He says, am I the only one sick of the Flores bashing? Like, do people get off on this? This question comes from Mark. He says, like, people actually believe Flores sabotaged the team, yet he's one who has handed a practice squad roster. He was the one who was handed a practice squad roster. The obsession with Tua has clouded so many people's judgment. People even laugh that he hasn't gotten a job, which is strategic on his part. What is our reality? We don't have a coach, and I strongly it has a lot to do with the organization. Greer and Ross, in my opinion, are part of the problem, and the fans who support Tua over the franchise itself. So they're also the problem, I guess is what you're saying, Mark. It is rumored that Daboll never wanted the job. He wanted leverage for elsewhere. Do you think this is bad or just some of the same repeated cycle of rebuilding again soon? I haven't heard the Flores bashing from other people. Maybe I don't know. I don't know. I can't imagine, because to be honest with you, if we could, I don't know how a sane person can say Brian Flores isn't a good head coach. I just don't know how that's possible. I think the biggest, and again, the reason he's gotten criticized as bad as he has is because he's exceeded his expectations. He really did. I know he did. I mean, everybody, when this man was hired, said this is a 4-year rebuild. And going into the man's 3rd year as the head coach of the team, people expected so much out of him because of how much success he had early on. And it hurt him in the end. And he had that much success with a terrible offense. He won 9 games with a terrible offense. He won 10 games with a terrible offense. I was really excited to see George Godsey one more year as the OC. I thought he was heading in the right direction. You know, Brian Flores had the most cap space in the league. I was excited to see what he would do with that to improve the offense. I think they were finally going to do that. So I was excited for those things to happen, and obviously they didn't happen. So it is what it is, man. I don't know what else to tell you, Mark. I don't understand it. Clearly, Stephen Ross and Chris Greer, I think, made the wrong decision to fire him. Hopefully they make the right decision to replace him with whoever they're going to replace him with. Hopefully they make that a good decision. They obviously have made a good decision in Brian Flores when no one knew that he was going to be, even me, I didn't even like the Brian Flores hiring at the time. And they proved us all wrong. So hopefully they can do it again. And hire the right guy. But I think at the end of the day, it's hard for me to, I just cannot believe someone can look at his years in Miami and say those were bad. Like, he's a bad head coach. I just don't know. I don't know. There's not many teams in the league that had that. I don't even think there is a team in the league that had such a bad offense and won that many games. I mean, the man finished 8-1, and people want to bring up the fact, oh, it was against bad competition. The offense the Dolphins had was just as bad as all of the offenses that they played. Every single one of them. Okay? And they overcame it. So, here's a stat for you guys. The Jets scored more touchdowns the last month of the season than the Dolphins did. And they finished 8-1. So you tell me who's a good head coach or not. I just don't understand it. This next question comes from SM. He says, I'm a potential big name head coach. I don't know why I said I'm a potential. He says, I'm a potential. Okay, he does say I'm a potential. My bad. I got to get closer to this thing. Let me restart this. He says, I'm a potential big name head coach like Harbaugh or Payton. I agree to come to Miami, but I refuse to give control to Chris Greer regarding free agents and draft picks. Matter of fact, in a deadlock, I want the deciding vote. Will you guarantee this? Yeah, I don't know why you wouldn't if you're Steven Ross. And this last question comes from SM. He says, pay Mike Gesicki big money or let him walk. To be honest with you, I think if McDaniel or Harbaugh is hired here, I don't think he's going to come back, guys. I don't think they value that type of tight end. Maybe they do. Obviously, Mike McDaniel values tight ends, just not that type of a tight end. I mean, he's coming from an offense that had George Kittle, George Kittle is the best run-blocking tight end in the league, and he's a very physical player. So I think they need that. I mean, I don't think they see the value in Mike Gesicki. Or their offense can't really. If it was someone like Sean Payton or Josh McDaniels or someone who ran more of a spread offense when it comes to passing the football, because Josh McDaniels obviously gets under center, but he switches personnel a lot and formations a lot. The 49ers do too, but most of their success comes from under center and physical smash mouth football. So I just don't think Mike Gesicki fits that. Neither does he fit the Harbaugh thing, which is the same thing. It's physical smash mouth football. So that's it, guys. That's all I have to say for this week. That was the last question. Thank you guys for commenting. It means a lot. I'm interested to see what I'm very excited to see what the Dolphins do. I hope it's not Kellen Moore. That would be the worst outcome. I would be a loss for words. It would be Joe Philbin and Adam Gase all over again if they hired Kellen Moore. So please don't do that. Please don't waste a good young roster on I don't want to sound rude or mean on Kellen Moore. I don't want to sound. Listen, as a fan who's watched this team for as many years as I have, just please, for the love of God, make the right decision. Okay? That's all I ask. Is that too much to ask? No, it's not. That's all I'm saying. Maybe I shouldn't. I don't want to sound rude. I don't know. The point is. I mean, Kellen Moore's a multimillionaire. Who the heck cares? I mean, Kellen Moore, who cares? Anyway, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed the show, and I'll see you guys in the next one.